I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Hi, this is Brooklyn Savvy, and we are delighted to have Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka. Oh, do I need psychotherapy? But before we dive into this, because there's so much to talk about, let me introduce our Savvy Panelistas. We have Valerie White, Ellen Salpeter, and Phyllis White Thorn. Thank you, ladies, for joining. So first, Dr. Afiya, I want you to explain to us what is psychotherapy.
Yeah, so psychotherapy is using hair as an entry point into mental health care. So it includes training hairstylists and barbers, mental health first aid, and community organizers, sort of these skills to use hair to heal. It can happen in a salon or barbershop space, but also at homes every day as parents care for their children's hair through social media, just promoting wellness through our hair care process.
So what does that look like? Because I remember as a kid, my mother combing our hair, and she'd complain, oh, your hair's kind of nappy, oh, it's thick, but if it was just a little straighter, oh, this is gonna hurt, all of this. Is that what you're here to heal?
I am. That sounds pretty traumatic.
Yeah. I wonder, what is trauma? Because, it seems like everything is now, trauma is like love. It's this big word and everybody's kind of putting things in it. What is trauma?
Great question. Mm-hmm. Trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So that's kind of broad, but to think about, we have micro traumas all the time where there can be sort of small nicks or cuts, almost like a paper cut. But there are larger recurring traumas that we have as individuals and even as a people. So trauma can really range in definition, but deeply distressing or disturbing experience.
So going to the hairdresser back in the 60s, 70s, and having to put a wooden spoon over my ear to make sure that I didn't get burnt, and then hearing a lot of negative comments, I guess that would be a micro trauma that just builds up a certain way of thinking about oneself. How does one heal from that space?
This is intergenerational, right? Mm-hmm. I think that therapy is helpful. I'm a therapist full-time. I'm a psychologist. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that therapy is a collaborative process of change. We don't heal in isolation. So although we could have a conversation about your hair trauma, it also would need a collective response because we need a cultural shift in how to think about and embrace our hair.
So when we think about trauma and you think about hair trauma, I'm thinking about our beauty salons. I'm thinking about parents and our children. When we talk to our children about their hair and the way we refer to their hair. So what you said a little while ago, Toni, was very traumatic.
It got worse. Okay.
Okay. Also, I think when I think about the trauma of hair, when I was much younger, little girl, sitting in the kitchen and having this woman bring this big old hot comb and seeing the steam and hearing
the sizzle.
Exactly. That I look back on it. I look back on it now. Did she burn me? Maybe she did, but before she burned me, I was traumatized. And so I can, now looking at it, at that time, I just was experiencing it, but now looking at it, I can see how that might have given me some negative feelings about my hair. And because I had to go through this. So that is one of the things that we need to. But where we can heal, again, is when we take care of our children's hair. Being cautious and being conscious. And there are children that are tender-headed.
Yes.
Recognizing that kind of thing, talking to them about their hair. Bad hair, good hair. That was another trauma for me.
Right.
The thought that now this is something else. The words, the conversation around my hair just solidified what I was feeling when I was sitting in that chair.
But it's interesting how a bad hair day has made it into the general vernacular.
And I want to think about, what is bad hair, good hair? We hear a lot about that. Let's talk a little bit. Unpack bad hair, good hair.
I think good hair was the hair that you could go to the pool and just shake off the water and get it dry, because that's when the perms came. And I remember we were like, I think I was in the 6th grade when I had my first perm. It stank. It was ultra sheen. It was painful. We were crying. You know, they had all this protective stuff around and we were crying and carrying on. But this is good because you know what? You'll never have to get your hair pressed again. And then you could run through the sprinklers and your hair would just, it was crazy. That's all I can say. That's what it felt like.
But what was crazier was putting all those chemicals on a 6th grader's head.
Yeah. But that's what you did to fit in. There's so much more to it, because it meant fitting in. It meant assimilation. It meant getting a job. It meant conforming, and it meant safety at the end of the day. It was so much more than that.
And it's interesting that we see that, right, as a way to assimilate or move into what society says was normal. But I want to go back a little bit about the what is it called again?
PsychoHAIRapy.
Okay. PsychoHAIRapy. In our culture, our relationships with our hairdresser are sacred relationships, right? So
And makeup artists.
And makeup artists, yeah, that's true. But the relationships that we have, right? And it is a soothing, I see it as a soothing relationship as an adult now. So one of the women in the other panel, I knew her for a long time, and also a counterpart, in the business at the time. I know her. I knew her daughter when she was in high school, got her job, still, have a relationship with them. The woman that does my hair now, she started doing my daughter's hair when she was 11. My daughter's now 36. She did my other daughter's hair, whatever. And I saw her kids grow up. But it's a safety-ness that comes with that. So I don't know if, and I'm wondering, right, is the trauma being repaired or replaced? Right? We still have the trauma, but we're going to this hairdresser to have this relationship.
But she had a nice relationship with her hairdresser. I had one where the hairdresser's complaining, or she's taking 2 hours to eat lunch and all this other kind of stuff, not respecting my time. It was a tough relationship. What to do?
I like her.
I had a rough hairdressers.
Yeah.
So I got new ones.
It reminds me of the Ghanaian proverb: when your sister is your hairdresser, you need no mirror. And so I'm thinking about that experience in particular. And just even thinking about throughout the African continent, hairstylists were oftentimes initiated into a status of priesthood because of the level of trust and confidence that you had to have in that person. Or even thinking about the Wolof of Senegal, oftentimes you would inherit your hairstylist from your family. And so to some degree, that person became the jolly or the griot of the family stories because of the years of talking to and hearing all the secrets of the family, that they could actually tell a whole history of your lineage. Or even thinking about Yoruba in Nigeria, every single girl is taught how to braid hair. But anyone who shows particular talent becomes the master braider. Let me say that clear, master braider, in terms of thinking about how they are responsible for the hair of their entire community. So there were rituals, rites of passage that people actually had to go through in order to earn the status of being a hairstylist or barber. How have African people been able to maintain their rituals related to hair? So a ritual is how we prepare our mind, body, and spirit to receive something. But we recognize that there is colonization, right? In terms of how each European country divided Africa in the 1884 Berlin Conference, that scramble for Africa. And we can see the residue of some of this colonization through mindset, right? This colonial mentality that although Europeans aren't directly on the land, still controlling their thoughts are. So I've been to Nigeria and seen a weave installed with a flashlight, right? The government and maybe corruption couldn't keep the lights on all day, but they're still installing weaves. But to think about contact with Western ideas and thoughts about straight, long, blonde hair being good, and how that got internalized through reinforcement or status, right? Even if we look at the attorneys in places like Nigeria, they're wearing white wigs, right? Powdered wigs. And so to think about that's what a professional looks like. But we were the first lawyers and attorneys. So just to even think about the myths about African professionalism and all of that, but versus the East, and just thinking about slave trade and all of that in terms of really pulling the greatest resource from Africa, people in our culture. And so just understanding the roots and context with different other cultural groups, robbing some of our great traditions.
I want to segue to you, Ellen. Now, your daughter was from Ethiopia. What kinds of hair travails did you go through with Hikmah?
I learned to braid. As you know, and I would say that, as a transnational and transracial adoptive parent, I had to take a bunch of courses, which were helpful, but none more so than hair. I would say that was a really big issue. And and she has shortish curly hair. And when she was younger, it was much easier, and she liked her hair in braids for the most part, and we were good. She was tender-headed, so we were good at not making them too tight. But once she was old enough to decide she wanted to do her hair, and I was not allowed to touch it anymore, and not at all, and I could never understand it. And
what's her relationship to it? Do you know? How does she relate to it?
To her hair?
Does she love her hair? Does she hate her hair? What is
it varies on the day, but she loves it, and she likes it much better than my hair. At first, I think she liked my hair, but then when she realized I had no hair, and she has so much hair, she really loves her hair, and she spends hours on her hair. She gets up 2 hours ahead of when she needs to be awake to do, well, she's a teenager, so hair and makeup, because if there is a TikTok video on what to do with her hair, she's watching it. And I would have to say that we go through more product than, I think that for me, that was eye-opening. And again, I came of age when there was no internet and there was no TikTok and there were no Sephoras or any of those stores. There was a drugstore. And you had a choice of like 6 shampoos, maybe. And I wasn't very fussy. And my daughter is, she's all over it, but she also makes her own masks. And, she will I will buy good olive oil, and then I'll buy the olive oil we use for her. No. She only goes for the good olive oil. And then finally I was like, okay, here's the budget for the hair, But she's really into it, and she's really experimenting with it. And so I would say the one thing, and I was telling Phyllis this before we were on air, I was saying, for me, and I really believe that safety comes first. And so my daughter likes to ride these city bike, electric bikes to school because she doesn't like to walk. And she has to wear a helmet. And a helmet and hair are problematic. And as a motorcyclist, I wear a helmet. My hair looks horrible when I'm done, but I want to survive. And God forbid if I have a crash, I want my head to come out in one piece. And so with my daughter, I always see her sneaking out of the house without a helmet. And I'm like, back in, where's your helmet? You cannot ride it, especially an electric city bike, because they go pretty fast without a helmet. And so we have this ongoing thing. So she'll braid it or like in 2 braids or she'll do something to wear the helmet. And I was saying to Phyllis, why hasn't some great entrepreneur solved this problem? Why isn't there a great bicycle, sports helmet? She likes to ride horses, ski, all these things that you need to wear head protection for the African-American community.
Absolutely.
And it seems like such a no-brainer, business idea.
Like you said, for the African-American community, but that says volumes right there, Right. I want to go back into this whole psychotherapy piece.
PsychoHAIRapy.
Oh no, but I meant to say psychotherapy though. Because, how does, you talked about hair as the pathway.
Yes.
How does hair become the pathway? And if you can share with us the conversations, what that looks like, the conversations you have with the barbers and the hairdressers, and then maybe a little bit about what you have with a client or a patient, whatever.
I love this. I love this. Yeah, I'm just thinking about how hair reflects what's going on inside of our heads, right? It reflects our identity, our feelings, our sense of cultural heritage. All of this can be understood through our hair. Our hair is a complex language system. And so one of my goals is to make sure that everyone becomes fluent in hair, right? That it's very coded, but we can decode it and process it together. In a lot of traditional African societies, it was understood that your hair needed to be neatly groomed. And if it was not, you were actually seen as having a mental illness because that meant you couldn't take care of yourself. And it was a sign and indication to other people, I need help. I need help.
But that's not the way it is here, though, right?
No, it isn't.
Right.
But to some degree it is, right? In terms of, I see myself as a psychotherapist in terms of giving a checkup from the neck up, right? There's a lot of information. Even when I'm doing traditional psychotherapy in my private practice, if someone is coming in with a particular hairstyle, I can read them a bit in terms of what is going on with them. You can see depression through hair, right? And I think even some of these videos on TikTok or other social media is showing, especially during the pandemic, people who had not been grooming their hair and getting locks, not intentionally, but just because they lost the focus and the energy that's required for taking care of Black hair. And so just to even see if someone's losing hair, we know there's a relationship between hair loss and stress, right? And hormones and the endocrine system and all of that. So just even the visual aesthetic of hair, we can tell something about someone's health. But in terms of my role, I oftentimes train barbers and hairstylists in things they're already doing in terms of how to engage in an assessment. Is this person potentially harming themselves or other people? Also, the training that I do with hair care professional includes active listening. So I would say in becoming a therapist, that was the hardest thing to learn, how to actually listen to someone without projecting your thoughts or idea or immediately giving advice.
Yeah, right.
Right, because when you really feel heard and understood, it is so healing. And so taking advantage of that positive relationship, hopefully it's a positive relationship between hair care professional and their client, to really lean into that, because there's a lot of research, even coming from like Ruth Brown, that says Black women are way more likely to get their hair done than to go to a doctor's office. And so to think about how we can enliven and embolden that relationship between hair care professional and their client, where there's already an existing relationship, and training hair care professionals to even make referrals, right? That's a big part too, because no one wants to be like, "Ooh, you're crazy, you need a therapist." But how do you actually engage in a conversation? Even part of the training, I teach hair care professionals how to find therapists for their clients, right? So to recognize, okay, we can talk about this, but going into that topic is a little bit deeper and I might not have the training. So even navigating resources related to health and healing.
Are we different from other groups though? Because you're saying we're far more likely to go to the hairdresser as opposed to the doctor. We know that we spend tons and tons of money on hair, but is that different from other groups?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So what does that say? Does that say that we are superficial?
No.
I'm just wondering, because
we're all
like
about our hair.
Good. Right. It says we like looking good, but shouldn't health come well, let me just stop being so idealistic. I'm not really being judgmental. I'm just wondering, again, setting our own standard of beauty, setting your own personal standard, being more internal than external. I hear. I'm just throwing it out here.
I love the question. Yeah. I'm conflicted in terms of. I do identify myself as a hair historian. And so even studying the walls from Egypt or ancient Kemet, we can see that traditional healers actually included hair care as their health intervention. So there are images where someone would come to a healer and describe various health issues, a stomach issue, their foot hurts, all that.
It is connected, like nails and everything else.
Yes, and so what the stylist or initiated priest would do would mix together different plants, animal fats, and oils, apply apply it to the top of the head, and due to the heat of the sun, it would melt into the hair, into the scalp, into the body system, and would address the health issue. So hair care products can actually be medicine, right? And so that expensive olive oil can be
I'm all over it.
medicinal, right? This herbal medicine, this plant-based medicine. But we also know the flip side of it, that it can also be poisonous, right? All this research coming out now in terms of causing cancer or uterine fibroids from the hair products that are being used. So recognizing that hair products do get into our body system, and if we can put healing things into our hair products, that it can actually heal the full body too.
When you're talking, what comes back to me is my beautician, because my beautician, when I go in, she gives me, we talk about what's going on in our bodies. We have such a great relationship. Even in the salon, people talk. There's a lot of healing, and I never thought of it quite that way, but as I'm listening to you, she'd make suggestions about, is this bothering you? Or maybe you should try this. And she even made some products to use in my hair, because she said, your hair doesn't need that. It's too fine. You really need these homemade, home-based products. And I think about that. I have a really wonderful relationship with her. In fact, I'm really nervous that she's going to retire. But the salon is a place where we come to relax and talk, and there's a place where you feel at home. And it's a really great place to experience that healing that you're talking about.
But I'm sitting here listening to these conversations that we've been having around hair, and I want to talk about self-acceptance, right? Meaning, it's like, we all going to have different grades of hair, all kinds of things related to it. But at some point, we have to accept who we are and how we want to project ourselves without judgment. One day you may want to perm, you might want to wear a weave, you might want to go natural, but we should have the freedom to express ourselves in that way, and self-acceptance. So how do you interrogate to get someone, I'm getting all this street therapy, but how do you interrogate to get people to self-acceptance?
I love that.
Beyond all of this stuff that we're talking about right now.
Yeah. One of the things that I've developed as an assessment tool is called the Guided Hair Autobiography.
Oh, this is some good stuff here.
The Guided Hair Autobiography is a life storytelling model through hair. So I elicit stories related to their earliest memories of hair, a low point or nadir episode, or a high point, the happiest, the best they've ever felt about their hair. And we'll actually go through and analyze the themes, the emotional tone, and to recognize how these moments have been internalized to make your self-concept, right? Everybody in here has a body, right? You have a body, but to recognize that we all then have a body image, right? So something in our head that we have internalized what we look like physically, and to be able to work with that and process it and confront it, right? Because sometimes we're a little off. I know that I grew up with a mother who was always on Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and all these different things. She thought she was humongous, but when I looked at her body, or even now, I'm like, you were not
as big as you thought you were by any stretch of the imagination, right?
She internalized what she looked like, that she needed to lose weight or, navigate this, I'm too big for my ideal, right? And so, but what does that look like then when it comes to hair? Because hair is the part of our body that is the most easily manipulated, especially when it comes to race, right? We can't change our skin color every day, our lip or nose size every day, but we can actually change our hair every day. And so then our hair takes on this real emotional energy, because it reflects how our mood, our feelings. And so if we can go through some of these hair stories, we can unpack maybe themes or emotional tones that keep arriving around our hair.
As I'm thinking about this, though, are we codependent on what other people are? Are we codependent with society? Is that the fundamental problem, that we are accepting someone else's narrative of who we are and not breaking through that and saying, but this is me, and I don't care about what you think, what you out there think. It's about what I think, right? And I wonder, when do we get there?
You say, well, I don't care what people think, but everything you think is informed by your external surroundings as well. Initially,
different. It's being awake to that.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what it is. It's a being awake. It's like saying, wait a minute, Toni, slow down. You really care about what these people think about what you're doing? It goes as deep as, do I really care what my husband might be thinking about what I'm doing? I mean, it has to be you. You have to be who you are, and being conscious of the fact that there's going to be all of these things coming in at us, but guess what? We can't change the system right now. So I've got to find a way to work with it to show up as the best version of myself. It's a process, and it takes work. And sometimes it takes help. And that's the thing that people need to understand, that if you feel that you need help through a mental health professional, take it. Take it, because it can be very life-changing. So Dr. Afiya, thank you. Now, you thought we might not have anything to talk about. So thank you so much for your wisdom and your presence here with Brooklyn Savvy. And we'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.
My question is, being light-skinned with natural or straight hair, do you think we have a voice in texture, the chaos, or insecurities regarding our hair as well?
Yeah, this was a really good question. Thinking about how skin color and hair texture are factors in racial identity and even maybe discrimination. I think that we make certain assumptions about people and their lived experiences based on their skin color and hair texture. But I'm also mindful of the role of white supremacy and racism creating divisions amongst Black people, right? In terms of what it looks like to have a united front versus chaos and destruction. That there is benefit to, racism when Black people are confused about their connection. So I have a mentor, Dr. Marva Lewis, who developed something called Talk, Touch, and Listen, where she says just 10 minutes a day you can heal your child through the hair care process. What are you saying to your child as you touch them? Are you touching them gently? Is it rough? Are you taking your time? What hair products are you using? How are you listening to them? How do they have choice and control over their process? I know for me, on Sunday nights, my mom would always let me pick the number of braids that I would get. And I would say 3 or 4, and she'd create this whole fractal design on my head, but I felt so empowered because I had the decision to choose the number of braids, not the full style, but to recognize how do we empower children through the hair care process versus tear them down and re-traumatize them.